Welcome to Sports Saved My Life. My name is Clayton Freck, and I'm the CEO and founder of Angel City Sports. We know the power of sport to change and in some cases save lives. We hear these compelling stories every day, and we created this show to share them with the world. Enjoy the show, and remember to like, follow, share, and comment. All right, today I am excited to interview an elite para-triathlete, MaryKate Callahan. We met a few years ago on a panel for the Challenged Athletes Foundation and have stayed in touch. And I just love her story and really want to let her share the details of her journey with our audience. She grew up in suburban Chicago, and when she was 5 months old, she contracted transverse myelitis, which attacked the spinal cord, and she became a paraplegic with a, correct me if I'm wrong, T10 level spinal cord injury. And while she started her career in sport in the pool back in grade school, I think, she has actually traveled the world competing in the sport of triathlon, attending 3, if I have my numbers right, world championships, placing top 10 in every one of them, and a bunch of other international meets. And the favorite part of her resume for me is that she set a course record at the Ironman Louisville. So I want to hear a little bit about getting an Ironman done, which just seems daunting and scary to me. She's also a disability advocate. And during high school, she sued the Illinois High School Association to create better opportunities for athletes with disabilities to compete in high school sports. She graduated from the University of Arizona and has worked in HR at Motorola since then. And she's currently training to make the team for Tokyo this summer. She's a beautiful soul on this planet, full of kindness, passion, and a zest for life. I know you're all going to feel her positive energy today. Welcome to the show, MaryKate.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So you get a really simple question, which is the title of our show, Sports Saved My Life. What does that bring up for you?
You know, I think for me, that title resonates with me so much because I think for me, because of sport, I'm the MaryKate that so many people know today. You know, I gained my confidence through sport. I gained my independence through sport. I found my voice really in sport. And I think everything that I gained or learned through or have learned through sport since, I've been able to apply in so many other areas of my life and aspects of my life. And I think more importantly, the community I met through sport has, left a forever imprint on me and, has made me want to now just give back to that community as much as possible in hopes that, someone else realizes what sport can do for them and leaves the same impact that it's left for me.
I love that. And one thing that's interesting about our community is when you talk to elite athletes, they all say, they don't say exactly what you just said, but they say a little bit, the last part, which is giving back and supporting that next generation of athletes. Literally, like across the board, Paralympians say that. And I think that makes this whole movement so much sweeter and more interesting than it might otherwise be because of that desire to give back. I'm going to challenge you a little bit to visualize where life would be. Who would you be if you didn't have sport? You knew the question before I even got it out of my mouth. You're so funny.
I would not be this energetic bunny, I like to say, confident person. I would be that timid 5-year-old girl in a purple sparkly wheelchair that, didn't know who she was or didn't know who she could become. And I think because of sport, I was able to learn, what else was out there and that I could really be anyone I wanted to. And, I could be an athlete, but I didn't have to be an athlete, but I was able to meet so many remarkable role models who were in the sport that, you know, had paved the way for me. And again, now has inspired me to really pave the way for this next generation.
Right. Yeah, I love that. All right, give me a 1-sentence description about you. Who is MaryKate?
MaryKate is a very positive, energetic, people-oriented person who, you know, has used sport to find herself and is now using, you know, everything she learned through sport to help other people find themselves.
Oh, that was so good. Have you practiced that before? I mean, that was.
I didn't actually. That was really hard, but
it was good.
I tried
like
to wing
a little
it.
bit of a run-on sentence, but like it's all good. You know, you got it done.
I'm not in 7th grade grammar, so we'll pretend that didn't happen.
By the way, I was terrible at grammar, so.
Oh, I hated it.
You're in good company. I like cried when it was time for grammar because I just could never figure it all out.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the first real segment of the show is around just childhood, right? And if your disability hit you early, then kind of your journey in disability. So talk to me just about, you know, growing up, the home you had, your parents, what were they like? What were you like as a kid? And then tell us a little bit about, kind of what you know, right, of your journey in disability, especially those early years. And then I want to go all the way through high school.
Yeah. So like you said, I acquired my disability at 5.5 months old. So, you know, life in a wheelchair, life not being able to walk was really the only thing that I knew. I didn't have a, you know, life before being in a wheelchair. And, you know, this was my normal. And I'm a firm believer of we all create our own normal. You know, there's no such thing as normal, really. So, you know, I was naive in the sense that I thought everyone rolled around in purple sparkly wheelchairs. And, you know, I think my parents really pushed me to be integrated as much as possible. And, you know, I say that was one of the greatest gifts that they gave to me was that independence of, you know, you can figure this out yourself. And I'm sure it was so hard for them to, you know, watch me, I don't want to say struggle, but watch me figure out how to do things myself. But because they were patient enough to let me do things, I've been able to do everything I've done in the last 25 years. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it was, you know, I wanted to be there right alongside my siblings, right alongside my cousins, you know, integrated in a regular school setting. And, you know, was just figuring out how to adapt life and figuring out how to make things work for me. So I think that's because of that, it's led me to a lot of amazing things since.
So we'll double back to the cause of the disability in a second, but I want to understand your journey in school and just the social side of that. I'm guessing you had really supportive parents, you know, if they were like joining you in a lawsuit and all this stuff, right? I mean, like my guess is your parents, but I'd love to hear a little more about your parents. And then like, what kind of kid were you?
Yeah. So like I said, my parents are amazing. They have always been amazing, you know, really just being my advocate when I didn't know how to advocate for myself. And I think through them, I learned, you know, that I also have a voice. And I think once they saw that I was able to advocate for myself, you know, they took a step back and allowed me to do that. And I think because of that, I grew into this like passionate advocate for, you know, not only sport, not only disabled sport, but really any passion that's close to my heart.
But like, okay, but I'm just picturing little 5-year-old MaryKate like rolling into kindergarten, right? You're probably the only kid in a chair, maybe even the whole school. Like, what are your earliest memories of like being so well integrated? Because if you talk to people that are frankly my age, right, that were going to school in the 70s, a lot of people, kids with disabilities, were actually separated, right? And they weren't able to be mainstream. So you were completely mainstream, right? Almost to a fault where you had to sue to get some access. But right, but like that's a really cool journey that you were just like plugged in. That you know the older generation, I think, largely had even a bigger struggle with.
Absolutely, and it's crazy to think that like, you know, a while, like many years ago, that integration wasn't even a thing, and now like that was what I grew up with. I was integrated with everyone else, and no one thought twice about it.
Yeah,
most of the time. But you know, for me, it was. And I think looking back, I realized it, but what I was doing is I was really indirectly educating my friends, my teachers really about what people with disabilities can do. And I wasn't doing it in a forceful way. I was doing it in a way of me just living my life, going to recess, going to gym class, and, showing them that adapting something isn't really a big deal. It's a little problem solving, and that's it. And, I think my friends are so grateful for that now, because, they don't think twice when, they interact with someone with a disability, because they saw how, unfazed I was at such a young age.
Okay. Like, you're just like skipping too much here. Where does that little strong girl, listen, high school is different. You've had a long life to sort of, get your feet on the ground, but, getting through grade school and wanting to join swim team as this little girl, like, where did that come from? Were your parents sort of there and then advocating with you, but then eventually they sort of faded into the, how did you become such a strong voice for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw, my parents definitely advocated for me when I was very young, and, were able to get me into so many different experiences and had so many different opportunities. So I think kind of looked up to them in a sense of, they were willing to go the extra mile to figure out how to integrate me in a mainstream school, or, in Montessori, or in, music class. And I looked at them on what they were doing and how they were doing it. And then I realized that I'm my own best advocate, because I know what I need. And, my parents might think I need to be pushed in a wheelchair at 5 years old, but I know that I'm totally capable of doing that myself. So I'm just going to speak up and tell them that. And I think when I started speaking up, that's when they saw that, I was confident enough in my own voice. And that's when they kind of took the step back, because, as you grow older, your parents aren't going to be able to be right there at your hip. And I think, again, they taught me that independence, and that independent advocacy that I have. And that has allowed me to do so many amazing things.
And I'm just going to throw a guess out here, but your personality and your confidence, assuming it was there in those early years, do you think that was an important part of just kind of finding friends and kind of being able to integrate socially? It's one thing to go to school. It's a whole other thing to find your crew and kind of feel like you belong there.
Absolutely. And I think I wish I could tell you where I knew where this confidence and this very just joyful person came from, but I really can't. And I think, I think it's something that I'm proud of, because that confidence and just being so full of life and so full of joy, I think definitely helped with that integration, because when you're confident in yourself, other people are going to be confident in you, and they're going to be confident in the situation. And, again, they're not going to be phased at all when you walk into a room maybe a little differently. And I think that definitely helped with a lot of the, settings where I was just trying to integrate with everyone else, and really just made it seem like this is no big deal. We'll figure this out. We'll get to wherever we need to go, or do whatever we need to do. It might be a little different than normal, but we'll make it work. And, I think that confidence really played a huge role in that.
If we can get to the idea of inspiration porn later on, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But I do think there's something really powerful in being matter of fact about disability.
Absolutely.
It's not oh, despite this or that or whatever, right? It's no, it's just a thing.
Yeah, it's who I am.
Right? I was born male, you were born whatever. We're all just come out, and these things happen, and it's there's no drama needs to be inserted into that equation, right?
No. Yeah, no, I think I think I just have always, been very matter of fact about it. This is who I am. I get around in a wheelchair, but that doesn't mean I can't do anything. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to figure out how to do something. And, I think being matter of fact about it made it a lot easier to integrate. Because I was able to clearly tell someone what I needed, what I didn't need, what was going to work, what we might had to adapt. And, again, indirectly was educating people about just disabilities in general.
I'm sure there's a whole crew of people behind you, that you've educated. All right. So let's back up to transverse myelitis. So explain it. What is it? How does it happen? If we know, and then what's the the impact? And then I want to hear, a little bit about your parents and like just their processing of it. Because by the way, I'm a parent, and it's like they don't give you a book about this stuff, right?
Absolutely not. And that's one of the things I think why giving back is so important to me, because, you know, a parent whose child has just sustained a life-altering injury, or an adult who has just sustained an injury that is going to forever change their life, like they don't walk out of the hospital with a guidebook on how to raise a child with a disability or how to grow up with a disability.
No,
and, you know, I know my parents learned from other parents, and I learned from other, you know, adults or young adults or adults in general on how to grow up with a disability, because, you know, maybe my parents didn't have the answer. So, you know, because of those two groups, I'm who I am today, and my parents are who they are today. And so I think both of us just, you know, really have a big place in our heart to give back. But, you know, going back to the transverse myelitis part, I guess, you know, transverse myelitis is a virus. It can be caused by numerous things. It's very unusual that a child at such a young age, you know, I was 5.5 months old, gets transverse myelitis.
What's like the normal age range where it hits people?
Young adults, like 15 and older, usually, you know, there's a big range between like 25 and 40 as well, that get it. So, you know, kind of the timeline of what happened is, you know, I had an ear infection a couple weeks prior to December 21st, 1995. You know, was treated with antibiotics, was totally, you know, again, happy-go-lucky baby, was learning how to roll over. And, you know, my parents put me to bed one night. They came in to check on me in the morning, and my body was completely limp. So something had obviously happened over the course of the night, you know, 8 hours. And so was rushed to the hospital. Doctors really couldn't figure out what was going on. You know, couldn't use my hands, couldn't control my core. My legs were, you know, not moving at all. And so a couple days later was diagnosed with transverse myelitis. And I think doctors, looking back at my medical records, they're thinking that ear infection that I had a couple weeks prior triggered it. But it's something like we'll never know for sure. So originally I was a quadriplegic. I couldn't use anything below my neck. And with transverse myelitis, you know, some people make a partial recovery and some people make a full recovery. And so that wasn't unlikely. So, you know, started vigorous physical therapy and occupational therapy, and was fortunate enough to, you know, over the course of 2 years, gain the function in my upper body back. And so, you know, now I'm that T9, T10 paraplegic. So.
And you originally were a quadriplegic, meaning all 4 limbs were affected. Do you still have some residual effect with your upper limbs?
Yeah, and it's crazy actually to think about, because, you know, I gained the function of my hands back and the upper part of my body back, but I didn't necessarily gain the sensation. So I actually can feel like hot and cold and, you know, like a needle on my legs, but can't feel it as well on my upper body. And, you know, transverse myelitis, it's not like a spinal cord injury.
Hold on, that's super funny. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So you can feel hot and cold in your legs.
Yeah.
But you can't really move them.
Yeah, functionally move them, no.
And with your arms, you can't feel hot and cold, but you move them perfectly fine.
Yeah, so bizarre. And like all the testing that I've gone through, like it's crazy. But I think, it is because, you know, in a spinal cord injury, like if you were in a car accident, your spinal cord is severed. And so with transverse myelitis, it's the myelin around the spinal cord that's inflamed, that causes the nerve damage. And so, you know, I'm an incomplete paraplegic. So, you know, I have, you know, some smaller movements in my legs, but, you know, again, nothing functional where I would be able to walk. And, you know, I think that's also part of my upbringing is, you know, I did walk with long string crutches and a walker, but I just got to a certain point in my life where I wanted to keep up with everyone. And, you know, my parents saw that was so important to me. And, you know, they were okay with me using a wheelchair, you know, full time. And, you know, I think, you know, doctors are always trying to push like being mobile and, you know, getting circulation and weight bearing and stuff. But I think they saw just how important it was to me just to be right alongside of my friends at that age. And, you know, I think that was something, probably a little bit of acceptance had to go on with them, but,
so
you know,
how old were you when you made that transition?
I was in like 2nd grade, because I remember I would have physical therapy at school during the day, and I'd be walking up and down the hallways, and you know, I couldn't keep up on my walker. I couldn't keep up on my crutches. And, you know, I never wanted to miss a beat. And so I knew in order to not miss a beat, I would need to be in my wheelchair. And, you know, my wheelchair was able to get me to all the places I needed to go.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's really interesting, right? Because you do see a like a reluctance, right, to, I mean, there's the whole limb salvage community, which is like, you know, life might be a lot better on a prosthetic, but people sort of choose to try to hold on to the limb and they keep operating on it. And then you see people in walkers and, you know, different, you know, scenarios trying to sort of stay upright when it's a real struggle. And you're right, they're just not going to be able to keep up with anybody.
Yeah.
So that's a, you know, that's a journey in acceptance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the way that people in society have stereotyped wheelchairs almost, because, you know, I think you hear like she's bound to a wheelchair, but really I found myself in my wheelchair. I was able to find what I was able to do because I had the freedom I had in my wheelchair and the independence I had.
Yeah, like
so I think it's really just this like concern of, oh, she's going to be stuck in this thing, or maybe a wheelchair is more limiting. Where for me, it was the total opposite. Like the walker and the long string crutches were 100% more limiting than a manual wheelchair was.
Right. Yeah, great.
Let's take a quick break to learn more about the Equipment Loaner Program at Angel City Sports.
Equipment is a major component to this objective. Each individual piece of equipment can cost more than $3,000. Can you imagine if running shoes cost that much? So we're building an inventory of adaptive sports equipment to support our clinics, competitions, partner programs, and to loan out to emerging local athletes. Currently, we have racing wheelchairs, throwing chairs, and sport wheelchairs, perfect for tennis and basketball. If you or an athlete you know need a piece of adaptive sports equipment, visit the Equipment Opportunities page at angelcitysports.org. If you are interested in donating equipment or supporting the Equipment Loaner Program, email us at info@angelcitysports.org.
I want to come back to that day, that the morning that your parents found you basically paralyzed. What do they tell you about that period of time between then and the hospital getting diagnosis? Like what would they say?
Yeah, I mean, I remember like they've told me like what kind of was coming out of the doctor's mouth as, you know, they figured out that I did have transverse myelitis, and, you know, it's the doctors telling them I'm never going to live a normal life. I'm going to have to have 24-hour care. I'd have to be rotated.
Wait, they said 24-hour care?
Because at the time I was a quad, you know, I wasn't able to do anything on my own. And, you know, that is nothing, and no parent could ever prepare to hear those words. But, you know, there was something in my parents that they knew they weren't going to settle for what was coming out of those doctors' mouths. And, you know, immediately they went into like, what can we do right now to help this solution and, you know, or help this issue? And, you know, that was getting me in therapy immediately and, you know, starting this recovery process that ended up, you know, recovering the upper part of my body and being able to use my arms and, you know, control my core and, you know, be able to sit up. And, you know, because of them responding so quickly, I'm a firm believer of like, that's why I was able to regain a lot of the function that I did regain.
Oh, really? Oh, that's, wow. So they just didn't believe the medical experts who they're told to believe. I mean,
yeah, I think it's cool. That, and also just like, I think it's like that flight or flight response. Like you're in the moment and you just want to do everything you can to, you know, prove people wrong. And yeah, so I'm so grateful that they did respond as quick as possible. But I think also like with all that therapy, I got involved in aqua therapy, which is kind of where I believe I found my love of the water, and you know, have been a fish ever since.
I love that. All right, so it feels like your personality hasn't evolved or changed that much, that you're the same kind of positive, happy-go-lucky, little girl. But I don't know, we all go through phases. So like, was there like a phase where you were off, or did you get in trouble? Like what, like, give me some nuggets from like, or you were just like this perfect little kid?
I wouldn't say perfect. I mean, I wish I had some more like scoop to give you, or like, what do the kids call it? Some tea. But like, I really don't.
Shoplifting. You didn't like, like pull the fire alarm at school. Like, come on, nothing.
Oh, I honestly I got a bully notice one time in 7th grade because my friends and I like made our own little clique locker, but like we all got it together. So like I wasn't the only one. There's 7 of us went down with it. But honestly, like, no, I like there, and I think like part of me is really grateful because I was never bullied. I was never felt like I was singled out. I was never this troublemaker, or at least I don't think so. My parents might say otherwise, but I just enjoyed the day for what it was, and really was like your happy-go-lucky kid.
So we're going to get into the discrimination side of sport in a second, but did you ever feel otherwise, right? So discriminated against or sort of discounted or counted out? You didn't feel that growing up?
No. And I've been asked this a couple of times in various settings, and I've really tried to reflect back on growing up, because I'm like, maybe I just shoved that memory out. Yep. But really, I never felt like I was being pushed to the sidelines ever because of my disability. And, I think a lot of it had to do with the people I was surrounding myself with. And I also think it just had to do with the confidence that I evoked in a room or in a situation. And I think, those two things combined, I really didn't.
Yeah. It's remarkable. I love hearing that. So I have a small town theory. I'm going to test it on you. So were you with more or less some of the same friends from early years through high school? Did sort of, or listen, I know high school gets bigger and more complicated, but were you kind of known in the community by the time you get to high school, or even junior high, where things, kind of socially can become challenging? What was your, did you guys move at all? Were you sort of put so kind of, you know what I mean? What was the context?
Yeah. So, I went to the same preschool and kindergarten, and then, went to 1st grade through 8th grade at the same school. So I was with the same group of friends. There were only 100 kids in our class. And then when it came time to go to high school, I went to, some of my friends in 8th grade went to the same high school. I went to a private high school, not in the same neighborhood where I grew up, but really not that far away, 25 minutes away. And we had about 400 kids in the class. So, that was definitely, it was a transition because, I went there with maybe 5 kids I went to grade school with. So I was meeting brand new people, and I was in a brand new school environment, but, never again was in any situation where I felt like I was discriminated against. And I think for me, going from grade school to high school, I joined the swim team immediately in Illinois. High school girls swimming is a fall sport, so it starts before school even starts. So, I was able to find this common bond between all these other swimmers. And, I almost had a group of friends before school even started in high school. And I think that's what sport really brings. It's a common denominator, where, whether you have a disability or not, you're able to relate to other people. And so I think that's where, sport also helped that transition, because it introduced me a group of people before I even started high school.
And it just creates a connection and a depth of a relationship that can move quicker because of the commonality than just randomly meeting a girl in the hallway, right?
Absolutely. You're athletes, and you're also students, and your student athletes going through the same experiences of, staying up super late, studying and doing homework, but then getting up at 5 a.m. for practice. So, you're able to relate to that group of people a lot easier.
By the way, sport saved my butt a couple times, making big life transitions, moving to the East Coast from California in 5th grade and then moving back in 10th grade. So neither of those are good years to move, right?
No, those are tough.
But, you know, being an athlete, and I wasn't as good of an athlete as you, but like it was okay. And at least I did enough sport that I found the same help in that transition. So I love that.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to dig deep into the sport journey, but before we leave the disability and the sort of the childhood story that we've got so far, you know, what would you tell the parents of a child, right, that had just, you know, their child had just had transverse myelitis and like, you know, like similar prognosis that like, yeah, doctors are saying she's going to be on a feeding tube and be a full on quad and never, you know, like, what do you tell those parents?
Yeah, I think the first thing is like, everything is going to be okay. Like, I think that's the first words parents need to hear. And I think, you know, my parents heard those through maybe not the medical teams, but other people. And I think because they knew they had a community of people behind them, they were confident in the decisions they were making on my behalf at that time. So, you know, first is everything's going to be okay, but second is never stop advocating for your child, because you know what they need most, and your child will eventually look at how you're advocating and learn those skills to be able to advocate for themselves. And that's the greatest gift that you can give them.
Well, I love that second part. And I think there's something really powerful there, which is parents, if we don't lead the way on this, right, I think it really creates a train wreck because you don't know how to do that. And we don't either. We have to learn by doing, right? But at least, you know, having the perspective of having lived 20, 30 years, whatever, right, that we can bring to the table to figure it out. So
yeah,
I think that's really powerful.
And I think the other piece is you don't have to have all the answers. Like,
right.
No one has all the answers, and there's an entire community of people that you can leverage to help find those answers and help, you know, gain more knowledge and ask people who've been in similar situations. And I think knowing that you have those people to tap into when you need them is really powerful.
And I do think that's like a part of the adaptive sports, and it's a perfect segue maybe for us. It's part of the adaptive sports sort of ROI, right? The return on investment, which is in the stands are the moms and the dads and the siblings and the family and the supporters, right? Or if it's an adult, then their kids might be in the stands, or whatever, right? Like it's not just about kids, but like, you know, it's like that mom effect, right? Of like transferring knowledge. And so I just am always trying to find the case for why adaptive sports should be in everyone's life if you have a physical disability, even if you don't want to be an athlete. And what you're pointing to is this whole body of information that sort of has the potential to sort of flow from family to family. But man, you got to bring the people together in order to allow that to flow. And there's nothing better than sitting in the stands and trading those kinds of stories and that information, right? While you're watching.
Yeah,
you're
absolutely. And I think it was, you know, for me, when I started adaptive sport, I started sport before I started adaptive sports. But, you know, I think it was when I started, you know, wheelchair basketball and wheelchair tennis and all those other sports, like while I was at practice, because I was too young to drive, you know, my parents would stay, they would be, you know, networking and talking to other parents. And while they were doing that, I was learning from other athletes. And so, you know, you see both sides of the party really benefiting from what adaptive sport can bring to the table.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I just feel like it's a story we don't tell enough about the benefits. And, you know, because I always try to think like, what's the hook to get new into it, right? So, all right. So let's just talk about your journey as an athlete. So you go right in part of your recovery, right, and part of the rehab process is being in the water. So it's a part of just your disability experience. But you join your first swim team at like 6 or something, young, right?
Yeah. So you know, for me,
it's not an adaptive team though.
No. So, you know, I was I can remember the moment so clearly. You know, I was at lunch.
Are you serious?
Kind of, yeah. Because I think you think about like I don't know. I reflect
I don't remember
back on like
from that being that old.
There's small, powerful moments that I remember of growing up, and this is one of them. There was two when I was 6 years old. Both had to do with joining a swim team, and I'll tell you both. But the first was, when I went home and told my mom I wanted to join the swim team, and the reason, or I guess what triggered me to do that, was because I was at lunch at school with my friends, and we were having normal conversations, and they were all talking about their AYSO soccer games and their swim meets and their track meets. And I wanted to be able to relate to them. Like, I wanted to be able to take part in that conversation. I didn't want to just be a listener. And, I remember coming home from school and saying, Mom, I want to join the swim team. And because I have the parents I do, like, we were going to do that. Like, they were going to find me a swim team to do it or join. And next thing I knew, I was, putting on a pink cap and a goggles and swimming. But, I wasn't winning races. I wasn't putting my hand on the wall first at practice. For me, it was purely about being able to relate to my peers and being able to interact socially with, other kids my age outside of the school setting. And, I think for me, that's when I learned everything that sport could teach me, both in the pool and out of the pool.
I love that. And I love that it came from you, right? It's like this little strong girl rolling into the house, ready to join the swim team. Okay. So that's the start in sport, and you're already like articulating all the benefits that you got from it. When does adaptive sport enter the picture, and how does it enter the picture? Because I have a I have like a theory on this one too, that it's just way more random than it should be, right?
Yeah. So I swam for 2 seasons, like summer seasons. And then that second summer season, a parent who was at a swim meet asked me and my mom if I had ever been part of like an adaptive sport organization. And she had worked for an adaptive sport organization herself. And at the time I hadn't. And that's kind of when I was introduced to this adaptive sport community. And, that's when the gates of all this, all these opportunities opened up.
So there is an element of randomness in your story, because it's some random parent that randomly saw you who happened to have that experience. Not everybody in the stands had that experience. So you got kind of lucky on that front. Mm-hmm. What was the first sport you tried? What was the first, was it GLASA? What organization was it?
At the time, so I
wasn't around yet, or was
GLASA may have been around, but I started now, like thinking about it, it's hilarious because I was an awful athlete at it, but I played wheelchair basketball. So that was like the first adaptive sport I did, and I was like one of the only girls on the team. Had a big bow in my hair.
Was your wheelchair?
Like I was ready to throw down. Like what?
Was the chair still like sparkly purple?
Oh yeah, I don't even think I was in a wheelchair basketball chair at the time. But like I was gonna put up a fight. I was an awful shooter, but like I was there because I was an athlete and I wanted to meet other kids like me. And so that was kind of the entryway into adaptive sport, which from there I joined Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association, GLASA. And then was introduced to all the sports. So, played wheelchair basketball for a few more years, wheelchair tennis, track and field, started water skiing and snow skiing, and, doing what kids should be doing is trying every single sport out there, because at that age, like you're too young to start specializing. Like you just need to be a kid and play for sports for the fun of it. And I'm so grateful I did. And,
And what you're saying, so you're like 8 or 9 when you kind of started doing these sports. And what's cool about what you're saying is you're actually giving me the sort of the business case for multi-sport organizations like GLASA, like Angel City Sports, which is, we're not just focused on one sport. So you either like it or you don't, right? It's like we're offering, at Angel City, we're doing 20 different sports a year or more. So it does allow that new athlete, kid, adult, veteran, whatever, to like just sort of try before they buy, right? try as much as you can. And it's so sweet what you said, which is like, kids should just be playing, and you're so right.
Yeah. Like I was all about the snacks at the end of the meet or like whatever it was, but like that's, you're only a child once, you're only a kid once. And like, you're never going to get that time back to just be a kid. And, I think I thoroughly enjoyed every single year of being a kid and being in sport.
Right. I love that. Okay. So in the pool, when did you realize you were a good athlete? Was it in the pool, or was it in a racing chair? Like, when did you kind of go, oh, maybe I'm good at some sports? Because now you're a triathlete, meaning you're putting multiple sports together, right?
Yeah.
In pursuit. So like, how did that even hit you that like, oh, I'm good, I can do this?
Yeah, so it definitely started in the water. And I mean, like the National Junior Disability Championships, kind of grew up going to all of those in the summer, from like the ages of 8 to 14.
What was the last one you attended?
I want to say it was like something somewhere in Michigan. And I think it was like, what year? So I graduated, maybe it was like 2011.
Okay.
So like 10 years ago. Oh my God, that's so scary.
Before my time. I was trying to see, did we overlap at junior nationals, but we didn't.
Yeah, no, I think it was 2010 or 2011. But, kind of grew up going to those, all the, regional meets during the year. And then, swam. I was still doing like club swimming during the year on a non-disabled swim team. So just like a club team in the area. So I was swimming in a bunch of meets then, and, started seeing like the emerging times and started going to Can-Ams, and, things just naturally really progressed, I think. And, I thought swimming was my sport. Like I thought I was going to be in it for the long haul. I loved the water. I loved just being so free in the water. Like it was just, you needed a cap and goggles, and it was super easy. But like I said, I was also doing track. I had a hand cycle that I was just utilizing when my friends were riding bikes, really. And, there are so many amazing like leaders in the disabled sport community, like yourself. And one of them, Carrie Sirota, who was at Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association at the time, was like, why don't you do a triathlon? And I looked at her like she was speaking gibberish. And I was like, you are insane. I'm not going to do a triathlon. And I was 13 at the time. And she wanted me to go to New York to the New York City Triathlon and swim in the Hudson River. And my parents were like, okay, we're all about like independence, whatever, but I'm not throwing my 13-year-old in the Hudson River. But so safe to say I didn't do the New York City Triathlon that year, but I did it a few years later. But I did a local race, and when I was 14, that was my first triathlon. And they say when you cross the finish line of any race, but of a triathlon, like you're going to immediately be hooked, and that was absolutely me.
And then a short time later, you like start going like you're good. You were good, like quick, right? You're like, before you know it, you're like going overseas and traveling, and you make the U.S. team to hit a world championships when you're pretty.
Yeah, I made my first U.S. national team, U.S. national team in 2012, and raced at world championships that year out in New Zealand. And, my first world championship experience, I didn't finish the race because I had a bike mechanical issue. And I think looking back, the last 10 years of racing, I'm so grateful for that moment. And I would have never thought those words would come out of my mouth at the time, because I was hysterical when that happened. But, I think you learn from failures, and you learn from moments that are really tough. And, at the time I was the youngest member on the team. That was my first international race. Like I thought I just let down the entire world, but it was something that was so out of my control. And like, something we could have never predicted. And like, I truly believe that fueled me and probably still continues to fuel me as I continue to race since then. And yeah, I mean, the triathlon community and the triathlon world and elite racing, the doors were opened up then and have stayed open. And I'm just so grateful for the triathlon community. And it's been so amazing to watch the sport of paratriathlon grow, because it is a newer sport. Like, we're not that old. 2021 will be only the second time it's debuted in the Paralympic Games. And so, you know, we're still trying to, you know, set the tone and pave the way in the sport and continue to grow the sport. And, you know, that's just what's so important for me is, you know, to continue to help grow the sport in whatever way possible.
So just for any members of our audience that don't know the sport of triathlon well, or maybe even know it, but don't know the sort of the nuances of paratriathlon, can you just kind of walk us through, you know, how it works for you, right? The different stages and transition and all that stuff. And then maybe talk a little bit about the classification system and how they, you know, kind of how they're grouping athletes in the triathlon system. Because I know there was a letdown when it came to Rio on that. So I want to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, so in the sport of paratriathlon at the like elite World Cup racing level, the distances are a 750 meter swim, a 12-mile bike, and a 5K run, so 3.2 miles. And, you know, that doesn't mean that paratriathletes aren't racing other distances. I've raced everything from that distance through an Ironman, and that's just what the International Paralympic Committee has, you know, outlined as the like elite paratriathlon distance. But for me as a wheelchair user, you know, I swim using just my upper body most of the time. We're swimming all the time. We're racing in open water. So we're normally in a wetsuit. Depending on the water temperature, we might be wearing just lava pants. But for me, I'm just swimming with my upper body, get out of the water, get through transition, the time doesn't stop. So go through transition as quickly as possible, jump on my hand cycle, which is propelled just by my upper body. It's pretty recumbent, and then go out on a 12-mile bike ride, and then come back into transition again as quickly as possible, and then I get into my racing chair. So for those of you who may be listening, a racing chair is used in like a lot of the marathons you may have seen on TV. I'm sitting on my knees, wearing some 3D printed gloves and going out on a 5K run. So that is paratriathlon in a nutshell. The classification system in all parasport obviously is always, you know, up for debate. But for us as a wheelchair user, it's pretty straightforward. I'm in the wheelchair classification. Within the wheelchair classification, there's 2 sub-classifications. So based on, you know, how much lower body use you have, you're either a 1 or a 2. And how it works for us, similar to like Para-Nordic, is those athletes that are in the, you know, higher functioning classification have a delayed start. So we get like a 1 minute and 40-second head start, and then they go. And but the medal is, we're all 1 medal event. So you know, because
I kind of like that staggered start concept. I mean, it's just sort of it's cool. I don't know. I mean, it's probably hard to keep it super fair, but like, it's still kind of an interesting concept to sort of try to, you know, get everybody, you know, starting at a fair moment, but then right, everybody's fighting for that finish line.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating, like hearing about the research that they do to determine that factor. But I think for me, what I like about it is, you know, instead of 2 separate medal classifications, we're grouped as 1, and it makes it more competitive. And I think, you know, as an athlete, as an elite athlete, like we're there because we want to be competitive and we want a bunch of athletes at the start line. So I think, you know, condensing these events and using the staggered approach allows for that, you know, really competitive field. So, you know, it's worked well. But obviously, they're always looking to improve, always looking to level it out. So I won't be surprised if there's changes to come, but that's what it is for right now. So so because Paratriathlon was so new, it made its debut in the 2016 games. We had 6 classifications at the time and only 3 medals. So 3 classifications got the boot. And unfortunately, the women's wheelchair classifications was one of those classifications that did not compete in Rio. But, I think for me, like, it was heartbreaking because, like, I had my eyes set on 2016, but it also reminded me that I love the sport for reasons outside of, just competing at the elite level. Like, I loved everything the sport was teaching me. And again, the community it introduced me to. And so, I set out on some other endeavors during that period of,
like
Rio,
the Ironman.
like the Ironman. But I think I'm just excited to see how the sport grows, and whether I'm racing or not, like, I'm excited to see this, and it's been really exciting just to see new athletes come in, because that's what's going to help take this sport to the next level.
So what did they do for Tokyo? Did they added a class or 2, right? And is your class in the mix for Tokyo?
Yes, our classification is in the mix. What they did, comparing 2016 to 2021, they condensed classifications. So now instead of 6, we have 5. So there were 2 classifications that got the boot for Tokyo, but we're not one of them. So we're in.
I'd like to take a quick break to show you how you can get involved as a volunteer with Angel City Sports.
Are you interested in supporting Angel City Sports? We're seeking volunteers to help organize clinics and events, as well as support our athlete outreach efforts, marketing and media, and even fundraising and development. All skill sets and backgrounds are welcome in support of our mission to provide free adaptive sport opportunities for children, adults, and veterans with physical disabilities or visual impairments. For our younger athletes, we welcome you to join the Angel City Youth Leadership Council. Middle and high school age students are eligible to join the Youth Leadership Council, where you will learn about the disabled community by working side by side with our athletes and acquire important skills such as teamwork, leadership, philanthropy, and event management. To sign up for our volunteer newsletter and stay up to date on all upcoming opportunities, visit angelcitysports.org.
Like, what are you thinking about on the course? Like, where is your brain when you're in, some important, because you've been doing these big triathlons for a long time. Like, where's your head? What's the emotional journey you're going through in a race?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with before a race. So people always joke, but it's really not a joke, that my game face is a smile. But
it's so hard to believe. I can't even believe this at all.
But it sounds so cheesy to say, but I'm literally radiating joy before a race. And I think for me, it's because I've enjoyed every single part of this journey and every single step it's taken me to get to every race, big or small. And, for me, it's just, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, a once in a lifetime chapter of my life. And so you might as well enjoy it. And so, before a race, I'm definitely, not a serious person.
Because some athletes are super serious.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm,
they're like, get out of here.
Yeah. They're probably the ones waving me off. But no, I mean, I try to contain it as much as possible, but it's also, I don't have a good poker face. So no, I mean, I purely am I'm really radiating joy before a race. But when the gun goes off, when we're in the water, I don't want to say I black out, but I don't really do a lot of thinking. And I think it's taken me a while to get to that. I think it's taken me a long time to get to that point, because I remember earlier on in my, elite racing career, I would always be worried about the competitors around me, or, I was worried about flatting, or I was worried about so many uncontrollable things that weren't going to do me any good to worry about. But so I think it's taken a lot of, and again, you learn through experience and you learn through many years of racing, but it's taken me a while to just not think about anything. And you just get in like this like autopilot mode. And it's like focusing on like every single swim stroke, every single bike pedal, and every single run push, and just focusing on that moment, because like that's all you can control at that point. And like, yes, there's been plenty of races that have been really, really close. And it's like, you're thinking about like, am I making the right move? Should I try to make the pass right now? But like, you have to stay in that moment, because like, you know, you as a racer, and you don't know what anyone else is like as a racer, or like, you know, what condition they're going into the race with. So yeah, I don't think.
Oh my gosh. Give me a prediction for how long you will compete in paratriathlon.
How much longer?
Yeah, like, do you want to be like this legend that's like in her 40s, like still going? Like, do you want to like become an age grouper and do it the rest of your life? Do you feel like, is there another sport in your horizon? Would you shift gears at some point? Like, I mean, triathlon, I've done some tries. It's a lot of work. Like, it's not the easy sport, right? It's a lot of work. It's all the gear and being, you know, trained in all these sports. I mean, it's tricky, you know? So
yeah, I mean, it's time consuming, just like any other elite training for any sport, just like any elite athlete training for any sport. Like, it's very time consuming, like 20 plus hours a week is going into just training. And so I think for me, I'm 25 years old, but I also am someone who has a lot of other goals outside of sport that I want to tackle. And, you know, I always say, and I've always said, that I want to end this chapter of my life still loving the sport, because I still want to be an athlete. It just might not be at this level. And, you know, I want to be part of the sport in other capacities, you know, as a coach, as a mentor, as, you know, different, just give back to the sport in different ways. And so, you know, with all of that being said, you know, I think for me, like, this is the last year of racing at this level. And I say that like with the biggest smile on my face, because the last, you know, almost 11 years have been some of the most amazing years. And I've learned so much, but I also am like getting this urge to just conquer all these other goals. And, you know, I have many other things I want to just do. And I know I can't spread myself too thin, because then I won't be able to do these other things to my best of my ability. So, you know, I think for me, it's more of like looking at sport just through an age group or lens, like doing more marathons, you know, doing some ultra marathons, doing some really long cycling events, because I will always be an athlete at heart, and being an athlete will always be part of my identity. It's just at a different level.
I love that. All right, talk to me about a couple of those other dreams. What else are you going after?
Yeah, so first thing is I'm writing a children's book, and that I feel that has been something like on my radar for 5+ years at this point. And you know, I think really it's going back to that 6-year-old girl in a purple sparkly wheelchair, and I wanted to see myself I wanted to see someone like me at my school's library. And I think, you know, it's all about representation and seeing yourself being represented, and also about educating. And, you know, I'm not expecting only children with disabilities to read this children's book. I want all children to, and I hope that they can take away something that they can apply to their life in a really, you know, fun picture way. So, you know, I started that earlier this year, that process. And then also going back to school. So I graduated from University of Arizona with a master's in psychology and sociology. I've worked at Motorola Solutions now for 4 years, but, you know, being an employee is also a large part of my identity. And, you know, I love what I do, and, you know, I love constantly learning. And so I do want to go back and get my master's. So obviously that's a time commitment. And so with training and with working and with, you know, still staying involved in athletics at some capacity, like it's never been something I was able to even entertain at this point, but I don't want to wait too long to go back to school. So, that's something else on my radar, but there's a couple like just adventure seeking things I want to do, of like hikes and stuff, that, I haven't been able to do because I've been so worried about getting injured and,
Right.
and
I'm jeopardizing your sport career. So you're
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just excited to be able to tackle that. And, so I think that's why I just say it with like, I'm sad to see one chapter, coming to a close, but I'm also excited to see this next chapter open because, there's a lot of great stuff in store.
But this is, give yourself some credit here, because this is a hard thing, right? To sort of retire, right? From the elite.
Retire at 25. I wish.
Side of sport, but I like the way you're planning. It's like kind of going out on your own terms. You're going out happy, and you got a bunch of things that are lined up next in your life. You got to be careful in parasport because you could be 40 and still grinding and like not have saved for retirement and like what are you doing? So you gotta find a balance, and it sounds exciting. So before we jump into my favorite section, which is I call it the soul searching section, I want to give you the time to break down your advocacy work. And I point to the lawsuit as this sort of seminal moment in your career as an advocate. And I know you're still out doing everything you can to educate the world, and you've been doing that since the little girl in that little purple wheelchair. But the lawsuit was really important. It changed, right? It changed law, changed society, changed access in the state of Illinois. Those kinds of things are good to have precedent so other states hear about that and realize they need to get their act together. So there's probably even like a halo effect of the, right? And California got to the game really late too.
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit about the lawsuit, the experience, and going through that as a high schooler, which I just think is so cool. You're judging, high schoolers are mostly juggling parties and hanging out with their
drama
buddies.
Yeah,
or it's all like high school drama stuff, right? Maybe somebody's got a part-time job. You have a lawsuit on the side that you're heavily engaged with. So talk to me about that, because I think it's just one of the cooler parts of your resume that really speaks to me.
Yeah, definitely sitting in on a deposition was not on my bucket list to check off as a high schooler, but it just appeared. But yeah, for me, like I said, growing up, I never felt like I was ever being pushed to the sidelines. Joined a swim team my freshman year of high school, was totally being integrated, was right alongside of all my, teammates and doing everything that they were doing, swimming in meets. But at a certain point in the swim season, the Illinois High School Sports Association was, really cutting off athletes with a disability, saying you can't compete at sectionals, you can't compete at state, and your season's kind of done. And so, I had briefly done some research on just not only why was this happening, but was this also happening in other states? And, I concluded with this wasn't happening in all states. It didn't have to happen in all states. And, I wanted to inquire about it. So, being the sophomore high schooler I sent an email to the Illinois High School Sports Association and asked to meet with them. And so, my athletic director at my high school, my swim coach, myself, and my parents met with the Illinois High School Sports Association. And, it was in that meeting that I heard adults tell me that because I had a disability, I wasn't an athlete. And to hear those words come out of an adult's mouth was shook me to the core, because I never wanted to hear those words again, but more importantly, I never wanted another child or another parent to hear those words again. And I think that is what triggered me to not stand down.
You think about the confident young girl that you were, and I probably don't worry about that girl hearing that message because she's going to flip it and be fine. But a less confident person could really take that to heart and kind of go the wrong direction with it.
Absolutely. And I also just knew how integral sports were in high school's experience, like a high schooler's experience, just not only for, you know, what you learn, like I said, in the pool, but also for what you learn and can apply outside the pool. So, you know, I remember going home and saying, like, we cannot take no for an answer. And, you know, my parents were on board, and we, you know, again, a couple more meetings later, ended up getting the Illinois Attorney General on board, and ended up filing a lawsuit. And, you know, the legal system isn't quick. And I was a sophomore at the time, and I had just wrapped up my sophomore season. And so I only had 2 more seasons. And, you know, I knew there was a really good chance that we might not settle this before my senior year season. And for me, like, I was okay with that, because if I was able to change the law and change the way people viewed people with disabilities for the generation behind me, like, that's all that mattered. And so, you know, we went full speed with it, and it was tough. Like, definitely, you know, again, like, you don't expect to sit in depositions or to be in settlement conferences or to have to turn over all your emails for the discovery process. But it was something I believed in so strongly, and something that I was so passionate about, that, like, I was willing to do whatever it took to get equal opportunity for athletes with disabilities at the high school level.
That's beautiful. What did you learn about being an advocate? Because I feel like you were already, like, probably a really good self-advocate, but this was different.
Yeah, I think this was an eye-opening experience in the sense of, you know, you don't have to be 45 years old to have a voice, and you don't have to be 30 years old to evoke change. And I think for me, it's, you need someone who's passionate, and you need someone who can articulate why something is so important. And I think that is when I realized that anyone can be a change maker, and anyone can use their voice. And, you know, that's when I realized that, like, this was the beginning of this was the beginning of, like, me trying to change the way disability is perceived, and also, like, the beginning of me just trying to educate as many people as possible on, you know, what people with disabilities are doing, and, like, what that means, and how people can, you know, use knowledge and apply it to their everyday lives, whether they're interacting with people with disabilities or not. Mm-hmm. Like, you look at universal design, like, universal design is there to help everyone, not just there to help people with disabilities. And, you know, moms with strollers are benefiting from elevators or curb cutouts just as much as a wheelchair user is. And, you know, really just giving that perception to all people, I think, is really eye-opening.
So does it make you want to get a law degree?
Maybe. So that was actually my original intent after I graduated with undergrad, was to go immediately into law school. And then I kind of took a step back, and I realized that I was kind of burnt out with just being in school, and I didn't know exactly the law I wanted to specialize in. And a couple opportunities came up, and I was like, you know what, school's always going to be there. Law school is always going to be there. Like, these other opportunities might not, and I might be able to learn something from these opportunities that I can then, you know, make a more educated decision on, you know, what I wanted to go back to school for.
Very cool. I love that. Yeah. I love that. And listen, we have a lot of advocates in our community, right? We don't have that many high school kids filing lawsuits. So kudos to you. You're a legend at a very young age, and you know, just important that the world hears your story and that kids are inspired, because I think your message is beautiful, that kids can make a difference. You know, we don't all have to wait for adults to figure something out. Like, no. let the kids lead. So I love that. All right, we're in the soul searching. Oh
boy.
This is the best. So tell me one fun, interesting, random fact about you that I don't know.
I'm a certified scuba diver.
That's cool. And you scuba dived a lot?
I have actually. I've dove for over 6 years now.
It doesn't scare you?
No, I love it. But the part that I don't like about it is that you can't talk underwater. So I'm the person that's like trying to get the last word in, and I have plenty of pictures of me like going under, trying to put like my face mask on to be able to breathe, like trying to get the last few words in. So that's the hardest part about it, for me at least.
So maybe,
but I'm also
maybe you need to design a system that allows people to talk to each other while they're
I guess I'll have to do that once I stop racing. I guess that's my next endeavor.
That's super cool. Super cool. Okay. What has your disability taught you?
My disability has taught me that your differences make you stronger.
I love that. What have you learned about self-acceptance over the years?
Oh, that's tough. I think for me, it's more, what I learned about self-acceptance is that our life journeys aren't going to look like the person next to us on our left or our right. And I think we can learn from the people on our left or and our right, but we have to do what we're passionate about and what we believe in. And like, if it looks different, that's okay. But if it is something that makes you smile and like, that's what gets you up every morning, like that for me is self-acceptance.
I love that. Kind of following your heart.
Yeah.
Being you, right?
Yes. There's a quote that actually my parents hung up on my wall when I was little, and it said, run with your heart, not with your legs. And like, obviously for me, that is very applicable, but I think it's also just very true. Like, you have to do what you're passionate about and what like sets your soul on fire. And like that, let that be your guiding light.
I love it. Did your parents like hang motivational quotes all over the house or something?
No, there was 2 quotes in my room. It was that quote, and then actually, I think I have a little. I have these little cards that I always keep in my bag, but it's the simple one. It's never, never, never give up. And I think for me, like obviously that like super cheesy quote, but I think it's like it can be so applicable to anything in life, because like there's a lot of things you can control in life, and there's a lot of things that you can't control in life. But like if you stay true to yourself and you put in effort and you like work hard, like the sky literally is the limit. And I think like it's just the reminder that I need every so often, like when we do hit speed bumps. So
yep. All right, talk to me about speed bumps. What would you say is maybe the most powerful lesson that you've learned from a speed bump, a mistake, a failure, a regret? I mean, you know, like.
I think for me, it's the like put energy into things that you can control and make sure you have all the tools in your toolbox to respond to the uncontrollable things. And I think for me, like I learned that lesson so vividly when I had a DNF at the World Championship race, because I snapped a chain. Like that is a very, very uncontrollable situation. And like literally no tool would have ever fixed that. But I think I had the tool of being able to like just realize like it's not over. And I had that mindset of like, okay, you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to just go to the next race. And like, this is a single race. This isn't your career. So I think, yeah, that would be it for me.
I love that. Does anything stress you out? And if so, what?
Being late. I do not like being late for anything.
Oh my God.
But I also think the future, like I'm a planner, I'm a type A person. Like, so like when things maybe don't go as planned, or, you know, you have to swerve off the plan, like it stresses me out a little, but like, again, knowing that things you can't control everything, you just have to bring myself back to that.
Well, and your advice to the parents, everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. I don't know if I said it exactly the way you did, but
you got it.
All right. right. What is your highest level passion?
Giving back. I think for me, it's, like we said, it's giving back to children, to adults, giving back to community. And, I think I had a family that was always passionate about that. And, we didn't talk about it, but I guess, shortly after I was diagnosed with transverse myelitis, my parents started the Claudia Foundation, which is an organization that gives back to communities, gives back to organizations, and gives back to individuals and families who are going through, a recently acquired injury, or who's an organization that is putting on programming for people with disabilities, because I think they saw how important, adaptive equipment, or, how important like being able to be in a house that was modified for a wheelchair user was to me. And so like they wanted to be able to give that to someone else. And so I think like seeing how that was developed and how that was grown and, still is in existence, like really showed me how important it is to, give back to the community.
I love that. Okay, so I'm going to give you the microphone to wrap us up today.
Oh boy.
And you get to sort of do two things. You get to just cover anything that maybe was unsaid, or thank people along the way that we haven't touched on. I think you touched on a lot of people in your life, but maybe there's some others in the life you'd like to acknowledge as being part of your journey. And also just, if you feel appropriate, let people know kind of how to find you, follow your journey in sport or life if they want. And then we can also put all this in the show notes as well. So
Absolutely.
the sort of the final monologue is yours here.
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, this was such a fun conversation. It was a great way to kind of end my Thursday. But no, I mean, I think for me, it's been, and I continue to say, it's been about the journey. It's been everything, from when I was born through, today. Like, it's not about getting from A to B. It's about how you get there and the people you meet along the way. And I think for me, when I realized that, it's just, savoring every moment, whether it's a training moment, whether it's about a racing moment, whether it's, being out for dinner with friends. Like, you just really need to live in the present, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And like, for me, like, I want to end every day with no regrets. So, I'm thankful for all the people that have been in my corner, everyone from, siblings to parents to coaches to, managers and coworkers. Like, they're all a part of who I am and why I'm the MaryKate that everyone knows today. So, I think a big just thank you and to everyone. So, for me, I'm a people person. I love talking to people. I love answering questions. I'm as active as possible on social media. So my Instagram is mk.callahan, CALLAHAN. My Twitter is mkcallahan13. And for those of you on Strava, you can find me on MaryKate Callahan and follow all my swimming, biking, and running adventures. But, I'm an open book. If people have questions, if people, have comments, like, send them my way, because I'm a firm believer, like, if you give people an environment, or you put people in an environment where they can ask questions, like, that's how we educate society, and that's how we move the needle forward. So ask me anything.
Love that episode with MaryKate. She should serve as an inspiration for all of us. When we see something that's not working, we figure out a solution. MaryKate recently retired from competitive Paratriathlon, and the Angel City community wishes her well in her next endeavors. For our next episode, please watch out for Jasmine Ryan, or Jazz as she calls herself. You won't want to miss her wild story about the stolen wheelchair.